Laughed when my estranged mother said my stepsister planned my 18th birthday without telling me, but now I regret not handling it better. My mom and dad separated when I was 6, each going their own way. They had joint custody of me, but soon they both started new chapters in their lives. When I turned 9, my mom married Robert, a man who already had a daughter, Kira, who was 2 years older than me. Meanwhile, my dad got engaged to Layla when I was 8, and they married when I was 12. My bond with Layla grew into something special. She's been every bit a mother to me, involved in every part of my life, giving me comfort and advice, sharing hobbies, and joining in all kinds of activities together. Just recently, Layla and I talked about her adopting me as soon as I turn 18. It would be tricky because of the custody arrangement now, but in my heart, she's my real mom and I want to make it official. Things with my biological mother couldn't be more different. Though I was required to spend time with her, there was never any connection. All her attention zeroed in on Kira, even though Kira already had a mother of her own. Whenever my mom tried to include me in any activity, she brought Kira along, and we always did whatever Kira liked. Eventually, I just stopped accepting her invitations, and often asked if I could skip the scheduled days with her, since I was almost always ignored and left out anyway. I much preferred being home with my dad and Layla. My father tried to understand, but was also bound by the judge's arrangements. As I grew older, he confided that he worried my mother might resort to legal trouble if he didn't stick to the schedule, totally in character for her. After hearing that, I understood his position completely and decided not to push the issue anymore. Now, here comes the part where everything unraveled. In 2 weeks, I turn 18. Luckily, my birthday happens to be on Dad's days, so he, Layla, and I started planning it a month ago. A small party at my favorite pizza place, just family and friends, nothing wild or fancy. I love karaoke, and the place has it, so all I wanted was a fun night with the people I care about, doing what I enjoy most. Once the plans were set, we sent out invitations to everyone, including my mother. I really didn't care about her being there, but figured this would be the last time I ever had to include her by force, since after I turn 18, the court's rules no longer apply. We sent the invites out 2 days ago. Almost everyone replied except for my mom, who left the message on read. I told my dad not to chase her. If she didn't reply, that meant she didn't want to come, and frankly, I was fine with that. I could see that my dad, though he didn't say it directly, was slightly relieved too. But then, drama struck. My mother called this afternoon, absolutely furious, accusing me of being childish and inconsiderate for planning my birthday without consulting her first. That honestly left me baffled. I reminded her that I always planned my birthdays with Dad and Layla, and that she usually didn't even remember my birthday, so her outrage was pretty rich. That only set her off further. Suddenly, she's telling me that Kira has been crying ever since the invitation went out, since she'd apparently already planned an entire birthday party for me. I was stunned. Kira and I are distant at best. She's always wanted the spotlight and my mother has fueled that behavior. We've never gotten along and have zero relationship, so hearing that she'd planned my birthday made no sense. I pressed for answers. Why was Kira planning my birthday, and why didn't anyone tell me? Did she really think I wouldn't make plans for my 18th birthday? It just seemed absurd. My mother claimed Kira wanted it to be a surprise, and since I hadn't told her my plans, she assumed there weren't any. She could have simply asked, but no, of course not. Then things got even more bizarre. My mother started rattling off all the things Kira had set up for my party, as if to try to make me feel guilty for missing out. But everything she listed were Kira's favorite activities, not mine. The day started with brunch at a fish restaurant. I don't eat fish because the smell alone makes me feel sick, not an allergy, just my body's reaction, which we even got checked. After that, there was supposed to be an afternoon at a ranch near my mom's place to go horseback riding, another thing I dislike. I don't hate horses, but getting that close to such a big animal scares me. The day was to end with a backyard barbecue at my mom's, something I didn't want at all, because I have zero desire to spend even more time with her. Apparently, they'd already invited everyone. When I asked who was on the guest list, I found out it was mostly Robert's family, my mom's family, and Kira's friends. None of my friends. No one from my dad's side. It was basically Kira's party, just using my birthday as the excuse. I couldn't take it anymore. I actually laughed in my mom's face and hung up. The whole thing was beyond ridiculous. A short while later, my dad came to me, looking concerned. My mom had called him in a rage because I'd laughed at her about Kira's so-called party, and she'd gotten him all upset with her version of events. He started to tell me that, as complicated as things were, they were just trying to do something nice. But I stopped him and explained exactly what had happened, how the entire party was arranged without me and didn't include anything I liked. That was news to him. My mom hadn't shared those details. His face changed instantly. He just said, "I'm going to make a phone call," then marched off. I could hear him yelling at my mother for at least 20 minutes. Layla later came to check on me. She empathized but pointed out that maybe it was a bit harsh to laugh at my mother and hang up. She thought I should have explained myself, acted like an adult about it all. I get her point, maybe I could have reacted differently, but after years of feeling invisible and unheard, sometimes you just, well, snap. As soon as she left, I sat with the weight of what just happened pressing down on my chest. She hadn't been angry, just disappointed, and that somehow felt even worse. I kept replaying it over and over in my mind, the way I reacted, the words I chose. Maybe I was too quick to defend myself, too hasty to shut down the conversation instead of hearing her out. I kept asking myself if bringing my mom into it would have actually done any good. Knowing how these situations usually go in our family, I personally didn't believe involving her would have really changed anything, except maybe to add to the tension. Deep down, though, I have to admit I could have handled things better. I could have paused, taken a breath, and tried to have a real, grown-up talk instead of closing off and letting my irritation take over. Now, after some reflection, I can see I might have been a bit of an asshole in that moment. Disappointment is a tough thing to face when it's directed at you, and maybe that's what I really need to work on. Update 1. First of all, I had a conversation with Layla about my reaction to my mother. Layla is the one who raised me to value open communication, always encouraging me to talk about my problems so I could work through them. So I understood where her comments on my behavior came from. Still, I needed her to see my side, too. I told her that the situation my mother described was so absurd, so utterly detached from reality, that laughter was literally the only possible thing I could do. While my mom was talking, I honestly wondered if it was some kind of prank or a bizarre joke. Her nonsense was just that unbelievable. Layla told me she understood. She just wanted to remind me, as many have, that there will be times in my life when I can't just laugh things off and hang up the phone, and she was only worried about how I handled things. We hashed it out, and I felt relieved. We cleared the air, and I'm really happy with where things stand between us. I also took the time to talk things over with my dad about his phone call with my mom. Apparently, my mom had an excuse lined up for everything. Kira just wanted to do some sweet sisterly gesture for my big day. She wanted to share her hobby with me, horse riding, and my mom insisted she didn't think my aversion to fish was real, just some whim, and that the restaurant they'd booked served the best fish. Which is a total lie, because when I was little, I actually threw up in front of my mother just because of a strong fish smell somewhere, so she knows very well it's not just pretend. My dad fired right back that absolutely nothing they had prepared was really for me. Kira had basically thrown herself a party, not me, because what kind of birthday was it if none of my favorite people were there? My mom had no answer. Instead, she started ranting that I was ungrateful and spoiled. Dad told her to go to hell and hung up. After hearing all that, I decided to follow another piece of advice and reached out to my mother myself. This time, I tried to keep things mature and polite. In my message, I even apologized for laughing, explaining that what she'd said was simply too ridiculous for me to react any other way. I reminded her that she'd never really made an effort to know me, that she didn't know me now and had never seemed to care about building a relationship. I pointed out that the party Kira organized was all about Kira, so they were free to enjoy it together with whoever they liked. I also told her that her invitation to my pizza party was revoked. She'd made her priorities clear on our last call. Now I was making mine clear and she was definitely not on my list. I already have Layla as a mother, and I can't be happier. I wrapped up the text by wishing her all the best with her new family and asked her not to contact me again. She read the message, but didn't reply, and honestly, that's more than fine. If she did respond, it would only be more accusations about how I'm ungrateful or spoiled. There's no point talking anymore. I've tried. I know she would never truly listen, or would just pretend not to understand me, but spelling everything out once and for all was my way of closing the door on this for good. It brought me a sense of closure and peace I didn't expect. Before, I probably would have just ghosted her after my 18th birthday, but really spelling things out was the firmer ending I needed. For those wondering how my mom could have planned a surprise party when I don't live with her, my dad actually asked her that too, and, to be honest, he took it a little personally, given that he was obviously going to do something for my 18th. Apparently, the plan was for Robert to come by early on my birthday, explain something to my dad and Layla, and then whisk me off to my mom's under some flimsy excuse. That never would have worked. There's no way I would have left my dad and Layla to go to my mother's unless it was actually our scheduled days, no matter what pretense they tried. Things might be different if my mom and I had a close relationship, but we don't, and we never have. In all this, Robert is the only person I can't find it in myself to blame. Even though we never bonded as stepdaughter and stepfather, he always treated me politely. When I lived with them, he even cleared out his study so I could have a proper room. He was always kind. If Robert genuinely thought the party was for me, I wouldn't blame him. He doesn't know me well enough to know my tastes, and I highly doubt my mother ever told him anything beyond what suited her. Thankfully, I never left anything of mine at my mom's house. All of my belongings are here at my father's, permanently. Whenever I used to visit my mother, I'd pack a bag with what I needed and then bring everything right back when I returned to my dad's. I just never felt safe leaving anything behind since Robert's relatives and Kira's friends came over frequently. I didn't really want to risk people I didn't know having access to my things. At this point, all I hope for is that my mom respects my wish and leaves me alone. I'd like to revisit the adoption conversation with Layla after the holidays, especially since she seemed truly happy when we last talked about it. I'm really grateful for the support and wisdom I received through this experience. Even though I know I still have a lot of growing up to do, this whole situation has helped me gain insight and look at things from more than just my own perspective. Just to be thorough, I don't have Robert's number, nor Kira's. We never exchanged numbers because our interactions never really called for it beyond basic good morning and goodbye stuff. I think I said my final farewell to them the last time I ever walked out of my mom's house. I also don't have much of a relationship with my mother's family. There's only my grandmother, my aunt, and my uncle. My uncle lives a few hours away and I've only seen him a handful of times for brief, distant interactions during holidays. With my aunt and grandmother, we keep things cordial, exchange holiday greetings by text, and sometimes they send me birthday money loaded onto my dad's card. But that's about it. Even during the rare times we met up, our conversations never went beyond casual small talk. In fact, I didn't invite any of them to my 18th and they haven't reached out since the drama with my mother, so I doubt they really care about what happened. Sure. Please paste the Reddit story or update you'd like me to rewrite, and I'll get started. Update 2. I thought things were finally settling down after cutting contact with my mother, but apparently the universe had other plans. 3 days before my birthday, Robert showed up at our door alone, no warning, no call ahead. Dad answered, and I could hear the tension in their voices from upstairs. When Dad called me down, Robert looked genuinely uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. He apologized for the surprise visit and said he needed to talk to me privately. Dad wasn't thrilled about that, but I agreed. Robert had always been decent to me, and honestly, I was curious what could possibly bring him here without my mother. We sat on the porch, and what he told me completely blindsided me. Apparently, after my dad's explosive phone call with my mother, she'd had a complete meltdown. But not the kind you'd expect. Robert said she'd been obsessing over me for days, going through old photo albums, crying about how she'd lost her baby and how it was all Kira's fault for being jealous and manipulative. That's when things got really weird. Robert revealed that Kira had been lying to my mother for years about me. Apparently, whenever I declined invitations or seemed distant during visits, Kira would tell my mom it was because I thought I was too good for them, or that I'd said mean things about my mother behind her back. None of it was true, but my mother believed every word because it came from her precious stepdaughter. The birthday party situation was the breaking point. Robert found out that Kira had specifically suggested all those activities knowing I hated them. She'd even laughed about it to her friends, saying she was going to put the spoiled princess in her place. My mother had been completely manipulated, and Robert was finally seeing the whole picture. But here's where it gets really messy. Robert also told me that he's been questioning his marriage for months. Apparently, my mother's obsession with Kira has been affecting their relationship too. She prioritizes Kira over their marriage, their finances, everything. Robert said watching how she treated me versus Kira finally opened his eyes to who his wife really is. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated. I wasn't crazy, there really was favoritism and manipulation happening. But another part of me felt almost sad. Not for my mother, but for Robert, who seemed genuinely hurt by these revelations. He asked if I'd be willing to give my mother one more chance, said she wanted to apologize and start over. I told him honestly that it was too late for that. Even if Kira had been poisoning the well, my mother chose to believe those lies instead of trying to actually know me. She chose her stepdaughter over her biological daughter repeatedly, and that's on her. Robert nodded like he expected that answer. Then he said something that shocked me. I think I'm going to leave her. Just like that. He said he couldn't stay married to someone who could be so easily manipulated against her own child, and that he was starting to see how she treated me reflected how she might treat him if he ever fell out of favor. Before he left, he gave me an envelope with $500 cash and said it was for my birthday, that he was sorry he wouldn't be there to celebrate with me. He also said that if I ever needed anything, and he meant anything, I should call him, because he considered me family even if the marriage didn't work out. After he drove away, I sat there for a long time trying to process everything. Dad and Layla were amazing about it, just letting me talk through my feelings without trying to fix anything or tell me what to do. My birthday ended up being perfect despite all the drama. Small group at the pizza place, lots of karaoke, and everyone who mattered was there. Layla gave me a promise ring, not romantic, obviously, but as a symbol of our commitment to making the adoption official. It was honestly the best gift I could have asked for. But the real surprise came the next day. My phone started blowing up with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Turns out, Kira had posted our entire family drama on her social media, painting herself as the victim who just wanted to do something nice for her ungrateful stepsister. She'd even posted screenshots of text conversations between her and my mother, though conveniently left out the parts where she was clearly manipulating the situation. The messages were mostly from her friends calling me names, but a few were from people who knew the real story, including one of her own friends who said she was disgusted by what Kira had done and wanted me to know that not everyone believed her version. I showed the post to Dad and Layla, and Dad immediately called Robert to let him know what was happening. Apparently Robert was furious and had a massive fight with my mother about Kira's behavior. According to him, my mother defended Kira and said I deserved to be called out publicly for being cruel to her family. That was apparently the final straw for Robert. He's staying in a hotel now and has contacted a divorce lawyer. I actually feel bad for him. He's a good man who got caught up in my mother's toxic family dynamics. The social media thing died down after a couple days, mostly because Kira's own friends started turning on her when more details came out. Apparently I wasn't the only person she'd manipulated and lied about over the years. I'm not sure what happens next. Part of me wonders if my mother will try to reach out again, especially if she ends up losing Robert over this. But honestly, I've moved on. I have my real family with Dad and Layla, and we're already talking seriously about the adoption process. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life creates space for the right people to step up. Robert proving he was willing to stand up for what's right, even when it cost him his marriage, showed me that there are still good people in the world. And Layla continuing to be the mother I always needed reminds me every day that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up for you, when it matters. Final update. I thought the drama was finally over after Robert left my mother, but apparently I was dead wrong. About 2 weeks after my birthday, things took a turn I never saw coming. It started when Layla got a strange phone call at work. The caller claimed to be from a law firm representing my mother, saying they needed to schedule a meeting about custody arrangements and parental rights. Layla was confused since I'm 18 now, but she took down the information and called Dad immediately. Turns out, my mother was trying to challenge the adoption paperwork we'd started filing. Her lawyer claimed that since the original custody agreement was still technically in effect when I turned 18, she had grounds to contest any adoption proceedings. It was a desperate move, but it meant we'd have to deal with more legal drama just when I thought I was free. Dad was livid and contacted our family lawyer right away. During that consultation, we learned something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, my mother had been telling people, including her lawyer, that I was being manipulated and brainwashed by Dad and Layla, and that's why I didn't want a relationship with her. She was trying to paint herself as the concerned mother fighting for her alienated daughter. But here's where it gets really twisted. 3 days after we found out about the legal challenge, Kira showed up at my school. Not my mother, Kira. She was waiting by my car in the parking lot after classes, and when she saw me, she started crying hysterically. I almost kept walking, but something about the way she was sobbing made me stop. When I got closer, I could see she had a bruise on her cheek and her lip was split. She looked awful. "Please," she said, grabbing my arm. "I need to talk to you. It's about your mom and my dad." I should have walked away. Every instinct told me this was another manipulation. But she looked genuinely terrified, so I agreed to hear her out. We sat in my car, and what she told me made my stomach drop. Apparently, after Robert moved out, my mother had completely spiraled. She'd been drinking heavily and taking her anger out on Kira, blaming her for ruining everything with her lies about me. The bruise on Kira's face? That was from my mother slapping her during a fight 2 nights ago, but it gets worse. Kira claimed that my mother had been meeting with some guy she'd met online, someone who was helping her with legal strategies to get me back. Kira said she'd overheard phone conversations where my mother talked about proving I was being abused or neglected by Dad and Layla. Complete lies, obviously, but apparently this guy was coaching her on how to make false reports sound credible. I was skeptical, especially coming from Kira, but then she showed me screenshots of text messages between her and Robert. He'd been checking on her welfare, and she'd been telling him about my mother's behavior. The messages painted a picture of someone having a complete mental breakdown. The really scary part came next. Kira said my mother had been driving by Dad's house at weird hours, sometimes parking across the street for hours just watching. She'd also been asking Kira detailed questions about my daily routine, when I left for school, when I got home, where I hung out with friends. "I think she's planning something," Kira said, still crying. "She keeps talking about how she's going to save you from them, and yesterday she asked me if I knew which window was your bedroom." My hands were literally shaking as I processed this. I asked Kira why she was telling me this now, especially after everything she'd done to sabotage my relationship with my mother. She broke down completely then. "Because I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed. "I was jealous, okay? You had 2 parents who actually wanted you, and I only had my dad. When your mom started treating me like I was more important than you, it felt good for once. But now she's scary, and I'm afraid of what she might do." I didn't know whether to believe her or not. This could easily be another manipulation, but the fear in her eyes seemed real, and the bruise on her face definitely wasn't fake. I ended up calling Dad right from the school parking lot. When I told him what Kira had said, there was dead silence on the other end for a long moment. "Come home right now," he said finally. "Don't go anywhere else, don't stop for anything. Just come straight home." When I got there, Dad and Layla were already on the phone with our lawyer and the police. They filed a report about the potential stalking and harassment, but the officer explained that until my mother actually did something threatening, there wasn't much they could do except document everything. That night, we installed security cameras around the house. Dad also made me promise not to go anywhere alone for a while, and Layla started picking me up from school instead of me driving myself. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. How had wanting to cut contact with my toxic mother turned into this. 2 days later, the situation escalated in a way none of us expected. I was home alone for maybe 20 minutes while Dad ran to the grocery store and Layla was still at work. The doorbell rang, and like an idiot, I answered it without checking the peephole first. It was my mother, but she looked nothing like herself. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had this wild look in her eyes that scared me, immediately. Behind her was a man I'd never seen before, tall, kind of greasy looking, with a smug expression that made my skin crawl. "Hello, sweetheart," my mother said in this overly sweet voice. I've missed you so much. We need to talk. I tried to close the door, but the man stepped forward and put his foot in the way. Now, he said, that's no way to treat your mother. She just wants to have a conversation. My heart was pounding as I realized this must be the guy Kira had warned me about. I told them to leave and said I was calling the police, but my mother just smiled this creepy, unnatural smile. Oh honey, you don't need to do that. I'm your mother. I'm here to take you home where you belong. The man, who my mother introduced as Dale, started explaining how they'd been building a case against Dad and Layla, how they had evidence of emotional abuse and manipulation. It was all insane rambling, but they seemed completely convinced of their own delusions. I managed to slam the door and lock it, then immediately called 911. But as I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I could hear them walking around the house, trying windows and doors. My mother was calling through the walls, saying things like I know you're scared, baby, but mommy's here to save you now. The police arrived within 10 minutes, but by then my mother and Dale had disappeared. Dad got home right as the officers were taking my statement, and I've never seen him so angry. Not just angry, terrified. That night, we stayed in a hotel. Dad said we weren't going back to the house until we figured out a better security plan. Layla barely slept, and I could hear her and Dad whispering about whether we should consider moving somewhere my mother couldn't find us. The next morning brought another shock. Robert called Dad directly with information that changed everything. Apparently, after my mother's latest behavior, he'd done some digging into this Dale character she'd been seeing. Dale, it turns out, is not a lawyer or legal consultant like my mother thought. He's a convicted stalker with a history of helping unstable people harass their ex-spouses and children. He'd been feeding my mother's delusions and encouraging her behavior because he gets off on the drama and chaos. Robert had screenshots of Dale's social media where he bragged about his current project of helping a devoted mother reclaim her daughter from kidnappers. He'd even posted photos of our house that my mother had apparently taken during her stalking sessions. The police were very interested in this information. Suddenly, what had seemed like a messy family dispute became a criminal matter involving a known predator. They issued a restraining order against both my mother and Dale, and started actively looking for them. But here's the thing that's keeping me up at night, they haven't found them yet. It's been 4 days, and they've essentially vanished. Their last known location was a motel about an hour away, but when police got there, the room was empty except for a wall covered in printed photos of me, Dad, and Layla, with crazy notes written all over them. We're still staying in hotels, moving every couple of nights. Dad's taken leave from work, and Layla's working remotely. I'm doing school online for now. It feels like our whole lives have been turned upside down by my mother's breakdown. The worst part is not knowing what she's planning next. Dale's criminal history shows he's escalated situations like this before, sometimes ending in violence. The detective assigned to our case said they're treating this as a serious threat, but that doesn't make me feel much safer. I keep thinking about how none of this would have happened if I just quietly ghosted my mother after turning 18 like I originally planned. Now I'm wondering if standing up for myself and cutting contact properly actually made things worse. Robert's been amazing through all of this, checking in daily and even offering to let us stay at his place since my mother doesn't know where he's living now. He's also been our main source of information about her mental state since he's the only one she might still contact. Kira's been staying with her biological mother, which is probably the safest place for her right now. She's been texting me updates when she can, and apparently she's as scared as we are. Whatever game she was playing before, this has gotten way too real for her to handle. I never imagined that wanting a normal relationship with my chosen family would lead to this kind of nightmare. All I wanted was to be adopted by the woman who actually raised me, and now we're essentially in hiding from my unhinged biological mother and her creepy accomplice. The police say situations like this usually resolve within a week or two, either because the person comes to their senses or because they make a mistake that gets them caught. I'm hoping it's the former, but preparing for the latter. Right now, I just want my normal life back. I want to go to school, hang out with my friends, and plan for college without looking over my shoulder constantly. Most of all, I want to move forward with the adoption so I can finally, legally, be part of the family that actually wants me. But until my mother and Dale are found and dealt with, we're stuck in this horrible limbo where every knock on the door or unexpected phone call could be the start of something even worse.